Hey guys, we're going to be doing a real simple exercise today. It's something I'm going to be repeating over and over again, I think, because I've realized that generally it's a good skill to be aware of. And that's photographing your work and then bringing it into Photoshop and kind of cleaning things up and straightening things out, or preparing it, for example, for a portfolio. I mean, maybe you're simply just trying to send out an image of your work to a gallery. Maybe you're trying to come up with some nice professional documentation of drawings or paintings for your website portfolio. I mean, a number of different applications, but this is pretty common where you photograph a drawing or a painting head on with nice even light, and and then you bring it into Photoshop and you clean it up as best you can. And so I'm not going to be using any of my work for any of these ongoing exercises. They're always going to be just sort of student submissions that I receive that are done really darn well, but could use just a little more oomph. And that's pretty much the case today with one of my students. And so here's the general upload that I received with, all the different project assets and sketches and precedents and all that good stuff. So this was all done beautifully, but then there is an image that is very clearly labeled final. Okay. And so I'm going to right click and open with Photoshop. And this shouldn't really take very long either. And this is a very uh, fast process. So let's see. So the first thing I would do is I would come up here to filter, and then I would come over here to lens correction. And usually I know exactly what kind of device I'm shooting with, and that could be an iPhone, it could be an Android, whatever. But here, I guess Brandon did shoot this with an Apple device. I'm not sure what make or model, but you could come in here. I'm just going to guess and say, oh, I don't know. Let's see. I'm going to guess an iPhone 11. No, that did not work. So I'm just going to go back to choose a camera model. It looks pretty good, or good enough in my opinion. But if you know exactly what kind of camera that you were using, you can come over here and you can spec that, and it'll automate some lens correction to remove the distortion. That's pretty much what that's all about. This is a really good image, and especially, just to give Brandon a nice comment, he has gotten really good over the years at photographing his work as straight on as he possibly can, because I think everyone who's listening knows that when you take a photograph of a drawing or painting, if you photograph it in the center straight on, you're going to have less distortion on the edges. And so there's really nice even light, although I'm guessing that he did photograph this with some tungsten lights behind him, because there is a little bit of, the light has a little bit of yellow tinge to it. And I think everyone on the call might see that. So we're going to correct that as well. So anyway, I'm going to hit OK. The other thing that I usually do right off the bat is I come up here and there's this straighten function. And I kind of zoom in a little bit, and I try to make it so that I can see as much of the image as possible. And with this tool, you just simply select 2 points, one, and then you drag, and then the other over here. And then it's just going to straighten the top of the image as best it can be straightened. Now, again, this is not a perfect system. You can kind of see that this drawing is still bowing a little bit towards the bottom. Those are little things that we can fix, but having a really good, I guess you'd call it a digital negative, having that initial quality negative will really help this process and make it a lot easier. And the next thing I usually do is I straighten the image, and then I take these handles and I bring them into the edge of the image as closely as possible. And so usually that requires me to zoom in a little bit. And like I said, I just kind of bring, you have to kind of move around a little bit and see, look at the details so that you don't crop anything important. It's okay, this little gap right here, we're going to fix that here in a little bit, but we need an edge. After we've straightened the image, we need this edge to meet the topmost portion of each edge as best it can. So that's all going to be corrected here in a little bit. It looks like this is kind of the most bottom-most aspect area. It's kind of meditative doing this work too. So sometimes if you're stressed out or whatever, kind of retreating into Photoshop and doing this kind of thing can make you feel good. That's what I found. Okay, so now all we need to do, we've made those adjustments. Now we just hit the check box up above where we're going to commit to the crop. Boom. Okay. The other thing I usually like to do is I'll hit Command S or Control S and save. And I'll want to save it as a PSD file. And I'm going to just call this final-Bollinger. And I'm going to put it in the same asset folder so I can find it later, right? Now you can kind of still see that there's this kind of yellow tinge happening. Well, more than likely, Brandon shot this painting against a nice, clean, kind of white wall. And so what I can do is I can hit Command L for levels. And then there's this little area right here where you can sample an image to set a white point. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the white balance. And I like this little area over here. Let's try that. And so that kind of burned things out a little bit too much, if you ask me. So I'm going to cancel out of there. And the other thing I want to do is I'm going to come over here to hit L for levels again. You can hit auto. Auto is probably going to do a variety of things that might even change the exposure a bit. So you can hit auto and see if that kind of changes things. Didn't really do a lot. Let's see if we can register any changes again. Let's hit auto one more time. It brightened it up just a hair, but it's really not noticeable in my opinion. What is noticeable is setting that white balance point. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of look in Brandon's drawing for the widest point, and I'm kind of seeing those areas over here, like right there. That's a bright location. So I'm going to set that as my white balance. I'm trying to figure out the right word to use, but it's I'm setting the white balance point. And see how that kind of brightened things up a little bit? It removed that yellow tinge. That's good. Okay, so now I'm going to hit OK. So now it just looks a lot brighter. I like it. Sometimes if you're photographing, before you even, while you're photographing things, what you can do is you can take just a sheet of printing paper and you can set it to the side here, and you can literally almost kind of preconceive the fact that down the road you're going to be setting your white balance. And instead of trying to find that white balance point desperately, you can actually just put a sheet of white paper right next door to whatever you're photographing, and you can use that technique and set that white point balance on that sheet of paper. That's the ideal circumstance. But again, I'm working on student drawings, paintings. We're still learning this process. So the other thing is that now we've got, this is pretty straight at the top. Everything's looking pretty good. But there's still some bowing at the bottom, right? Well, we can fix that by coming up here. Sometimes I forget. Oh, it's Command T for transform. And then as soon as you hit Command T for transform, you can come over here and you can, I don't know, there's like this warp mode. Okay, so if you click that, it'll add these sort of points that you can push and pull to straighten things out. And so I'm going to do that one more time in case you guys missed it. So Command T for transform. And then there's this little button right here that says switch between free transform and warp modes. That's what we want right now. And now I can zoom in, and there are these little like anchors that we can push and pull. And remember the top was pretty good, but we got to start basically pulling out. You know, I made a mistake though, so I'm gonna hit Command Z, Command Z. Before I do that, what I usually do is I go to each corner and I pull the corner so it's real nice and sort of snug. Okay, so that one's already good. This one can be pulled up. This one pulled. Okay, so now I can start grabbing these anchors and sort of pushing and pulling them. And what I usually do is I don't like to be too dramatic in this process. I think it's better to work slowly and incrementally. Sometimes you might have to make two passes around the drawing to make sure that it's what it needs to be. Because you can do this too much as well. You can get a little too overzealous with this process. You can see there's a little bit hanging out there. I'm just going to pull this a hair out, not much. And double check. Again, I'm making that second pass, double checking things. Then hit Command 0 so you can see everything. Yeah, that looks a lot better. And now whenever you're ready, you just hit the check mark for OK again, and hit Command S for save. And now you basically have a raw PSD Photoshop file that you can export for web, you can export for a portfolio, you can place it in InDesign, you can do anything you want with this. You know, so we took a really great drawing that was photographed well, and we improved it even more with a few simple operations in Photoshop. And I'm going to be doing these short tutorials quite often with student work, just to kind of reiterate, you know, the importance of this, because I say this a lot in my class. The majority of people unfortunately, are not going to be able to see your work in person. They see it on a computer screen or a device. So that makes the documentation really, really important. So save and close. Thanks, guys.